I was tangled in bed with my boss when my husband's voice exploded from the phone speaker. "You've got 5 seconds to get your damn hands off my wife, or I'll slice your Johnson in half." Twice. My stomach dropped like a stone. Alex, my boss, let out a nervous chuckle, waving it off like it was some kind of joke. "Screw you," he muttered, completely blind to the storm about to hit. But I wasn't. I knew my husband, Daniel. I knew exactly what he was capable of. Daniel had been a sniper in the Middle East. He wasn't the kind of man to throw around empty threats. When he promised destruction, it was only a matter of time before it came. My chest tightened as the reality of the situation sank in. Then, out of nowhere, a loud, sharp bang shattered the silence outside. My gut twisted into knots. Alex froze, his cocky smirk wiped clean off his face. His eyes darted toward the window. "What the hell was that?" he whispered, and for the first time, there was fear in his voice. I swallowed hard. "It's him," I choked out, my voice barely above a breath. "He's here." That was the moment the night turned into something out of a nightmare. And I had no idea, it was just getting started. That gunshot wasn't a warning. It was Daniel announcing his arrival. Alex sprang out of bed, yanking on his clothes in a frantic blur, his confidence crumbling right in front of me. And for the first time, I saw him for what he really was, a coward wrapped up in a $1,000 suit. "Emily," he hissed, his voice thin and panicked. "What the hell is going on?" As if whispering would somehow make Daniel disappear. "You need to go," I snapped, clutching the sheet against my body, my voice tight with fear. "Now." Alex shook his head, his hands fumbling with his belt. "I'm not going anywhere. He can't do anything to me." He was trying to sound sure of himself, but I could hear the tremble in his words. "You don't know him like I do," I said, grabbing his arm, my nails digging into his skin. "Alex, he's not bluffing. You need to leave before he—" Before I could even finish, Daniel's voice slashed through the tension like a knife. "I'm coming in," he roared from the other side of the door. "You've got 3 seconds to explain why your damn car is parked outside my house." The door shook violently as Daniel pounded against it. Alex's face drained of color, his frantic eyes locking onto mine, pleading silently for some kind of way out. But there was no fixing this. "Emily!" Daniel barked, his voice turning sharp and ice-cold. "Don't make me kick this door down." Alex finally snapped out of his trance and grabbed his shoes, his hands trembling as he jammed his feet into them. "This is insane," he muttered under his breath. "I'm not dealing with some psycho husband. I'm out of here." But the second he turned toward the window, another shot rang out. This one was closer. The window exploded, shards of glass flying across the room like tiny daggers. Alex stumbled back, his face contorted with terror. Daniel's voice rang through the night, thick with fury. "I won't miss next time." Alex spun around, his breathing ragged, his chest rising and falling like a man on the edge of panic. "He's crazy," he wheezed. "He's actually crazy." "No," I said, my voice hollow. My throat felt dry, my limbs frozen in place. "He's just getting started." The door burst open with a deafening crack. And there he was. Daniel stood in the doorway, framed by the dim hallway light, looking like something out of a nightmare, an avenging angel with fire in his eyes. Even without a gun in his hands, the way he moved, the way he sized up the situation with sharp, precise glances, it was clear his military training never left him. And Alex? He shrank in Daniel's presence, every last bit of bravado crumbling into dust. "Get out," Daniel ordered, his voice low and razor-sharp. Alex tried to salvage some dignity, straightening his tie as if looking put together would make him any less pathetic. "Listen, man, this isn't what it looks like." Daniel let out a cold, humorless laugh, more chilling than any threat. What it looks like, he repeated, taking a slow, deliberate step forward. It looks like you were in my bed with my wife. Alex flinched, stumbling back. Daniel didn't break stride. Now, you've got two choices, he continued, his voice steady as steel. You walk out of here on your own 2 feet, or I drag you out myself. Alex hesitated. His eyes flicked toward me, searching for help. But I didn't move. I couldn't. Fine, Alex finally muttered, lifting his hands in surrender. I'm going, Alex muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. Daniel stepped aside, leaving just enough space for him to slip past. But the moment Alex tried to slink away, Daniel's hand shot out, locking onto his arm like a vice. One more thing, Daniel said, his voice cold enough to freeze the air between them. If I ever see you near her again, I'll make sure you regret it. Do you understand? Alex's head bobbed up and down in frantic agreement, and Daniel shoved him toward the door. Alex didn't stop. He didn't even hesitate. He ran, bolted, until he was completely out of sight. And just like that, it was only the two of us. Daniel turned to me, the fury in his eyes still burning hot, though now it had sharpened into something more dangerous. His focus was locked on me, and for a terrifying second, I thought he was about to unleash all of it in my direction. So, he said, his voice eerily calm, razor sharp. How long? My throat went dry. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. What could I possibly say? That it was a mistake? That I never intended for any of this to happen? None of that would change anything. Answer me, Emily, he snapped, his voice rising. I swallowed hard. 2 months, I finally admitted, my voice barely more than a whisper. Daniel let out a harsh, bitter laugh, dragging a hand through his hair. 2 months, he repeated, shaking his head. And you thought I wouldn't find out? I didn't, I whispered, but he cut me off before I could finish. No. You didn't think, he spat. At all. His words hit like a punch to the gut. Do you even realize what you've done? What you've destroyed? The weight of his anger was suffocating, heavier than any slap or scream could have been. I wanted to defend myself, to offer some explanation, but what excuse was there? I had broken him. I had broken us. Daniel started pacing, his fists clenched, the veins in his forearms tight with tension. You know what the worst part is, he said, his voice shaking with something deeper than rage. I loved you. I trusted you. He gestured toward the bed, then to the shattered glass littering the floor. And this is what I get in return? Tears burned the back of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I didn't deserve his sympathy. I forced myself to speak. What are you going to do? I asked, my voice trembling. Daniel stopped pacing, his gaze locking onto mine. For a long moment, he just stared, unreadable, detached. Then, he let out another bitter laugh, shaking his head. What am I going to do? He repeated, his tone laced with something almost amused. Emily, the real question is, what are you going to do? He let the words hang there for a second before delivering the final blow. Because from where I'm standing, you've got nothing left. And then he walked out. Just like that. Gone. The silence that followed was suffocating. I stood there, frozen, listening to the sound of his footsteps fading down the hall. When the front door finally slammed shut, the weight of everything hit me like a wrecking ball. The room felt smaller. Colder. Like a hollow shell of what it used to be. The wooden floor creaked under my shaky steps as I drifted toward the shattered window. The night air was sharp against my skin, but it wasn't enough to shake the numbness settling over me. My hands trembled as I reached for the curtains, pulling them shut, as if shutting out the world would somehow erase what had just happened. I stood there, staring at the shards of glass scattered across the floor. My own reflection splintered into 1,000 jagged pieces. It felt fitting. My marriage. My choices. Everything I had built, broken beyond repair. And the worst part? The room still smelled like Alex's cologne, a sickening reminder of the betrayal Daniel had just uncovered. I sank onto the edge of the bed, my fingers twisting into the tangled sheets, proof of what I'd done, proof I could never take back. Then my phone buzzed. For a split second, I thought it might be Daniel. It wasn't. Alex. Alex, is he gone? Are you okay? I wanted to throw the phone across the room. Okay? How could I possibly be okay? My life was in ruins, and Alex was treating this like just another inconvenience, like a bad day at the office. I didn't reply. Instead, I sat there, staring at the screen, my mind spinning in circles. Daniel was gone. But for how long? Where did he go? Was he planning something? Would he come back? The thought sent a shiver through me, but I wasn't sure what scared me more, the idea of him returning. Or the possibility that he never would. The hours crawled by, but sleep never came. I paced the house, replaying every second of the night in my head, like maybe if I thought about it enough, I could rewrite the ending. It didn't feel real. One moment, I had been living a double life, balancing secrets and lies. The next, it had all collapsed. There was no hiding anymore. No pretending. Everything was out in the open. And I was standing in the wreckage. I was still lost in thought when the sound of the front door opening jolted me back to reality. I froze. My pulse pounded in my ears as I turned toward the hallway. Had Daniel come back? Or was this something worse? My heart slammed against my ribs as I turned toward the hallway, bracing myself for Daniel to come storming back in. But it wasn't him. It was Amanda, my best friend. She must have let herself in with the spare key, because there she was, standing in the doorway, her expression a mix of concern and confusion. The second her eyes landed on the shattered window, she froze. What the hell happened here? She demanded, setting her purse down on the counter. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. How was I supposed to explain? Where did I even start? The weight of it all pressed down on me, choking my voice. Finally, I forced the words out. Daniel found out. My voice was barely a whisper. Amanda's eyes went wide, and she let out a slow, low whistle. He found out about Alex? I nodded. A string of curses tumbled from her lips as she started pacing the kitchen, running her hands through her hair like she was the one whose world had just collapsed. Okay, she said finally, spinning around to face me. What do we do? Her words caught me off guard. We? This wasn't her mess to clean up. This was mine. Before I could even process that, Amanda pulled out her phone and started dialing. Wait, what are you doing? I snapped, my voice sharp with panic. Calling Alex, she said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. He needs to know how bad this is. Don't. The word came out louder than I intended. I snatched the phone from her hand, gripping it tight. The last thing I need is Alex getting even more involved. Amanda arched an eyebrow. Emily, she said slowly, like she was explaining something painfully obvious. He's already involved. You really think Daniel's just gonna let this slide? You need to figure out your next move before he does. A chill ran down my spine. She was right. Daniel wasn't the kind of man to let things go. I had seen that part of him before, the side that didn't forgive, that didn't forget. I sank into a chair, my fingers gripping the edge of the table like it could anchor me in place. What do I do? I whispered, my voice cracking. Amanda let out a slow breath and sat across from me. First, she said, you need to figure out if Daniel's coming back. If he is, you need to be ready for whatever he's planning. She hesitated, her expression darkening. And if he's not? I asked, even though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. Then, she said quietly, you need to figure out how to protect yourself. The word protect hung heavy in the air. From what? From Daniel? From the fallout of my own choices? Neither answer made me feel any better. The night stretched on, and Amanda stayed with me, helping me sweep up the broken glass and straighten the room as best we could. But no amount of cleaning could erase what had happened. The damage was done. Every part of the house felt different now, tainted, like the past few hours had soaked into the walls, staining them permanently. By the time Amanda finally left, the sun was creeping over the horizon. I was exhausted. But sleep never came. Instead, I sat on the couch, staring blankly at the TV, not even registering what was on the screen. My mind raced, chasing questions I didn't have answers to. Where was Daniel? What was he thinking? And, most terrifying of all, what was he going to do next? I didn't have to wait long for an answer. Around noon, a knock at the door shattered the fragile calm I had been clinging to. My breath caught in my throat. I stood frozen in the living room, staring at the door like it might lunge at me. Then, another knock. This time, harder. More insistent. Emily, a voice called. Not Daniel. The police. My stomach dropped. I forced my legs to move, walking stiffly to the door. When I opened it, 2 officers stood on my porch, their expressions unreadable, their presence heavy. Mrs. Thompson, one of them asked. Yes, I answered, my voice shaking. We need to talk to you about your husband. My blood ran cold. The words slammed into me like a truck. We need to talk to you about your husband. My mind spun, racing through every horrible possibility. What had Daniel done? Was he in trouble? Had he done something to Alex? 1,000 terrifying thoughts flooded my brain, and not one of them was good. I stepped aside, my hands shaking as I motioned for them to come in. The air in the house felt even heavier with them there, their presence making the space seem smaller, more suffocating. I swallowed hard. Is he okay? I managed to ask, barely able to get the words out. The older officer, a man in his late 40s with a thick mustache, exchanged a glance with his partner, a younger woman who seemed more focused on reading me than actually answering my question. Mrs. Thompson, the man started, his tone measured and careful, your husband, Daniel, was involved in an incident last night. My stomach twisted into knots. An incident? What kind of incident? I asked, my voice barely holding steady. The younger officer leaned in slightly, her sharp gaze locking onto mine. Do you know an Andrew Carter? The name made my blood run cold. Alex. My heart stuttered in my chest, and I felt the color drain from my face. Yes, I admitted, my throat tightening. He's my boss. Even saying the words made me feel sick. The mustached officer nodded, his face unreadable. We've been informed there was an altercation between Mr. Carter and your husband. His voice was calm but firm, carrying the weight of something far more serious than I was ready for. We're trying to locate your husband to get his side of the story. I froze. They were looking for Daniel? Why? I asked, my voice cracking. The younger officer's expression hardened. Because Mr. Carter was found early this morning at the hospital. He claims your husband attacked him. The air was sucked from my lungs. Alex was in the hospital? What? I stammered, struggling to process the words. That doesn't make sense. Daniel left last night. I don't know where he went, but, my voice faltered, uncertainty creeping in like a slow, suffocating fog. He had been furious. More furious than I had ever seen him. But would he really? The male officer straightened, his tone shifting, growing more authoritative. "Mrs. Thompson, we need to know everything that happened last night. Your husband's whereabouts, any contact he might have had with Mr. Carter. It's important that we get a clear picture." I felt trapped, like an animal backed into a corner. Do I protect Daniel? Do I tell them the truth? What was the truth? "I don't know where he went," I said finally, my voice shaking. "He was furious when he found out about me and Alex. He stormed out, and I haven't heard from him since." The younger officer tilted her head slightly, watching me closely. "And how exactly did he find out?" I swallowed hard, shame creeping up my spine. "He found messages on my phone," I admitted. "He came home early and saw the texts." The male officer let out a slow exhale, leaning back in his chair. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, his tone neutral but firm, "we're not here to judge your personal life. But if your husband acted out of anger, it's better for everyone if he comes forward now rather than later." I nodded, though I couldn't bring myself to say anything. A thick lump had formed in my throat, making it hard to breathe, let alone speak. "Do you have any idea where he might go?" the younger officer pressed. "Friends? Family?" I shook my head. "No," I said honestly. "He doesn't talk to anyone much since leaving the military. I don't even know if there's anyone he trusts anymore." The officers exchanged another glance. The mustached officer stood up first, pulling out a small card and extending it toward me. "If you hear from him, you need to let us know immediately." I took the card, feeling the sharp edges press against my fingertips, like it might cut me if I held on too tight. I stared at it like it was something foreign, something dangerous. Without saying much else, they left, their presence lingering long after the door clicked shut. I barely made it to the couch before collapsing onto it, my mind spiraling. Alex was in the hospital. Daniel was gone. And somehow, I was at the center of it all. My phone buzzed, yanking me out of my thoughts. I snatched it up, half expecting, half hoping, to see Daniel's name on the screen. But it wasn't him. "Alex. Your husband is insane. He broke my arm, Emily. Do you even understand how serious this is?" I stared at the message, my hands shaking. So that's what Daniel had done. He had found Alex. He had made good on his promise. Part of me felt sick, horrified at what had unfolded. But another part, one I didn't want to acknowledge, felt a twisted sense of satisfaction. I didn't reply. What could I even say? That I was sorry? That I understood? That I didn't blame Daniel? None of it would matter. Alex wouldn't care about apologies. He only cared about himself. The day dragged on, each hour stretching endlessly. I checked my phone constantly, waiting for something. A call, a text, a sign that Daniel was still out there. But there was nothing. Just silence. The silence stretched on, thick and suffocating. It wasn't until late that evening that it finally broke. My phone buzzed on the table. Not a text this time. A call. An unknown number. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the screen. My breath caught in my throat. For a moment, I debated letting it go to voicemail, pretending I never saw it. But something in my gut told me I couldn't ignore this. Finally, I answered. "Hello?" There was a brief pause. Then, "Emily." Daniel's voice came through, low and steady. A cold mix of relief and fear crashed over me. "Daniel, where are you?" I asked, my voice unsteady. "The police were here. They're looking for you." "I know," he said, his tone eerily calm. "I saw them leave." A shiver ran through me. He had been watching. "Daniel," I swallowed hard. "What are you going to do?" For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then, finally, I'm not turning myself in, Emily. Not yet. Daniel, please, I begged, gripping the phone tighter. This is serious. They think you. I know what they think, he cut in, his voice sharper now. But I'm not done yet. A chill shot down my spine. What do you mean? I whispered. Not done. You'll see, he said simply. And then the line went dead. I sat there, frozen, the phone still pressed against my ear. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. What was he planning? His words echoed in my mind, refusing to leave. I'm not done yet. What the hell did that mean? What else was left to do? I started pacing, every nerve in my body on edge. The last 24 hours played on repeat in my head, over and over, a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Daniel wasn't the type to make empty threats. When he said something, he meant it. And that terrified me. I tried calling him back, but the number had already been disconnected. Panic tightened around my chest. This wasn't just anger anymore. This was calculated. Would he go after Alex again? Would he come after me? The thought made my skin crawl. I needed to talk to someone. I dialed Amanda. She answered on the second ring. Emily, what now? She asked, her voice sharp but concerned. Daniel called me, I blurted out, my hands shaking. He said he's not done yet. A beat of silence. Then. What the hell does that even mean? Amanda finally asked. I don't know, I choked out, running a hand through my hair. But he sounded determined. Like he has some kind of plan. Amanda let out a heavy sigh. Okay, first of all, you need to calm down. Freaking out isn't going to help. Did he say where he was? No, I muttered, sinking onto the couch. He just said I'd see. Then he hung up. Great, Amanda muttered. So now we're just supposed to sit around and wait for whatever chaos he's about to unleash? I squeezed my eyes shut. What else can we do? I snapped. I can't exactly call the cops and say, hey, my husband's planning something, but I have no idea what it is. Amanda was quiet for a long moment. Then, in a low voice, she asked, do you think he's going after Alex again? I hesitated. I don't know, I admitted. But if he does, this time it won't just be a broken arm. The thought made me sick. As much as I resented Alex for dragging me into this mess, I didn't want Daniel to throw his life away over it. But deep down, I knew. This wasn't just about Alex. It was about me. My betrayal. And that terrified me more than anything else. You need to get out of the house, Amanda said suddenly. I blinked. What? Think about it, Emily, she said firmly. If Daniel's planning something, and he's still this angry, do you really want to be sitting here when he shows up? I didn't answer. Go to a hotel or something, she pressed. Just until this blows over. I hesitated. She had a point. But leaving felt like running away. And yet, staying felt like walking straight into the eye of the storm. Finally, I let out a shaky breath. Okay, I said quietly. I'll pack a bag. Good, Amanda said. And Emily? Yeah. Call me if anything happens. I mean it. I ended the call and headed straight for the bedroom, yanking a duffel bag from the closet. My hands moved on autopilot, stuffing clothes inside, but my mind was somewhere else, on Daniel. Where was he right now? Was he watching me? Waiting for the right moment to make his move? The thought sent a cold shiver down my spine. By the time I was ready to leave, night had settled in, draping the house in long, eerie shadows. I grabbed my keys and reached for the front door, only to freeze in my tracks. Daniel's truck was parked across the street. My heart stopped. He was here. I scanned the darkness, my eyes darting from shadow to shadow, searching for any sign of movement. But I didn't see him. Was he hiding, watching me from the cover of night? Was he waiting for me to leave? Or worse, waiting for me to come back? Panic clawed at my chest. I slammed the door shut and locked it, my breaths coming in short, uneven gasps. I clutched my bag against me like it was some kind of shield, but it was useless. Nothing could protect me from the storm Daniel had become. My phone buzzed in my pocket, jolting me. I fumbled to grab it, my fingers shaking. A text from Daniel. Smart choice staying inside. Don't worry. I'm not here for you. Yet. A fresh wave of terror rolled through me. Yet? What the hell did that mean? My hands trembled as I typed out a response. Daniel, please. Whatever you're planning, just stop. This isn't going to fix anything. I waited. Staring at my phone, willing it to buzz again. But nothing. The silence stretched on, suffocating me. Then. A loud crash from outside. I bolted to the window, yanking the curtain back just enough to see. My stomach sank. Daniel stood next to Alex's car. The windows were shattered. The tires slashed. A crowbar dangled loosely from his grip, his movements methodical, calm, like he was taking out the trash. I shoved the window open just enough to yell. Daniel, stop. What are you doing? He glanced up at me, his expression unreadable. Cold. Making sure he gets the message, he said, his voice slicing through the night like a blade. Please, I begged. You're going to get yourself arrested. Daniel smirked and shook his head. Not tonight, Emily. His voice was disturbingly steady. Tonight, I'm just getting started. Before I could say another word, he dropped the crowbar with a metallic clang and strode back to his truck. Then, he was gone. I stood there, gripping the windowsill, my pulse hammering in my ears. This wasn't over. Not even close. The wreckage outside was more than just a destroyed car. It was a warning. A statement. Daniel wasn't just angry, he was in control. And now, his fury wasn't just about revenge. It was about domination. My phone buzzed again, yanking me back from my thoughts. Alex. Are you seeing this? Your husband is insane, Emily. He's going to kill me. I stared at the screen, my breath shallow. What could I even say? That I was sorry? That I'd make it stop? Daniel was beyond my control now. He was a storm rolling in, impossible to contain. Minutes stretched into hours as I sat in the dark, hands shaking, mind spiraling. I thought about calling the police. But what would I even tell them? That my husband trashed someone's car because I cheated on him? That he was unraveling right in front of me, and I was too afraid to stop him? Turning him in would be handing him over to the wolves. And as much as I feared him right now, a part of me still couldn't do it. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was some twisted loyalty I didn't deserve to feel. Either way, it left me paralyzed. Then. A knock at the door. My stomach dropped, Daniel wouldn't knock. If it were him, the door would already be splintered off its hinges. But that didn't mean whoever was on the other side was here to help. My throat tightened. My fingers curled into fists at my sides. Who is it? I called, my voice unsteady. A beat of silence. Then. It's Alex. His voice was low, urgent. I hesitated. Every instinct told me to leave him out there, to let him deal with the wreckage on his own. But before I could make up my mind, my fingers betrayed me, unlocking the door. I cracked it open just a sliver. Alex shoved his way inside before I could even think to stop him. He looked awful. Pale. Strung out. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair a mess, and his right arm hung in a sling, a stark, painful reminder of what Daniel had done to him. He started pacing immediately, raking a hand through his disheveled hair. "Emily, this is out of control," he muttered, his voice shaking with equal parts fear and anger. "We need to do something." "Like what?" I snapped, shoving the door shut behind him. My back pressed against the wood as I crossed my arms. "Call the police? You think that's going to stop him?" Alex stopped pacing, his bloodshot eyes locking onto mine. "We don't have a choice," he shouted. "He's not going to stop until he destroys both of us." I swallowed hard, my mind racing. He was right. Daniel wasn't going to stop. But calling the police felt like throwing gasoline on a wildfire and hoping it would somehow put the flames out. "Alex, you don't know him like I do," I said quietly. "If we call the cops, it'll just make things worse." Alex let out a bitter, humorless laugh. "Worse?" He shook his head in disbelief. "Emily, he broke my arm and trashed my car. What's next? You think he's just going to let me walk away from this?" I had no answer. Because the truth was, I didn't know what Daniel was capable of anymore. The man I had married, the man I had once loved, was a stranger now. A force of pure, unrelenting rage. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed again. Not a text this time. A call. I looked down at the screen. Daniel. My breath caught in my throat. Alex saw the name, and his face went ghostly pale. "Don't answer it," he said quickly. But we both knew I had no choice. If I ignored him, it would only make things worse. I took a deep breath and swiped to answer. Pressed the phone to my ear. "Hello?" My voice was barely more than a whisper. Silence. Then. "You let him in." Daniel's voice was smooth. Cold. Calm. The kind of calm that made my stomach turn to ice. "That's bold, Emily." A pause. "Bold and stupid." I froze. "Daniel, where are you?" I asked, my pulse hammering. "Close." His answer was chilling in its simplicity. "Close enough to see you're still making terrible decisions." My breath hitched. I turned toward the window, scanning the street. Nothing. No sign of him. "Daniel, please," I begged, my voice cracking. "This doesn't have to get worse." A low, bitter laugh echoed through the phone. The sound sent a fresh wave of dread crashing over me. "Oh, it's going to get worse, Emily." The way he said my name, so quiet, so deliberate, made my skin crawl. "For both of you." Alex was staring at me now, watching every flicker of emotion on my face, trying to read what Daniel was saying. I turned away, pressing the phone tighter against my ear. "Then what do you want?" I forced out. Daniel's answer came swift and sharp. "I want you to listen." His voice was made of steel. "Because this is your last chance to make things right." A lump formed in my throat. "What do you mean?" I whispered. A beat of silence. Then. "You're going to end it." The words landed like a hammer. "With him. Right now. In front of me." I turned slowly, locking eyes with Alex. His face was twisted with confusion, with fear. He didn't understand. But I did. "Daniel, this isn't." "Don't argue with me, Emily," he cut me off, his voice razor sharp. "If you want to fix this, you're going to end it. Or I will." The threat was heavy, suffocating. Daniel didn't make empty promises. I knew that better than anyone. My hands trembled as I lowered the phone, staring at Alex through a blur of unshed tears. Alex, I said, my voice barely audible. He took a step forward. What? His voice was rising, growing desperate. Emily, I'm not leaving you alone with him. You don't have a choice, I whispered, my hands shaking. He's watching us. He won't stop until you're gone. Alex stared at me, the fight draining from his face. Disbelief. Anger. And then, defeat. So that's it, he said, his voice hollow. You're just going to let him win. This isn't about winning, I said, my voice breaking as tears spilled down my face. This is about surviving. Alex let out a slow breath, his jaw tightening. He hesitated for a moment, but finally, he gave a reluctant nod. Without another word, he grabbed his keys and headed for the door. Just before stepping out, he turned back, his eyes dark with something between frustration and hurt. This isn't over, Emily, he said quietly. Not for me. And then he was gone. The moment the door shut behind him, I lifted the phone back to my ear. He's gone, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Good, Daniel responded. His tone sent a shiver down my spine. Now we can really talk. His words weren't just a warning. They were a promise. My fingers tightened around the phone, my knuckles turning white as I tried to steady my breathing. My mind raced, grasping for what he might say next, for some way to stay ahead of whatever he was planning. What do you want from me, Daniel? I asked, my voice trembling but firm. I told Alex to leave. Isn't that enough? The silence that followed stretched between us, thick and suffocating. It felt like a noose tightening around my throat. When Daniel finally spoke, his voice was unsettlingly calm. No, Emily. It's not enough. Not even close. I swallowed hard, pacing the length of the living room, trying to shake the growing sense of dread clawing at my chest. Daniel, please, I said, my breath shaky. Whatever this is, whatever you think you're doing, it's not going to fix anything. You're just making things worse. I'm not here to fix anything, he said, his voice like ice. You broke this, Emily. You. I'm just here to make sure you feel what I felt. His words cut through me like a blade. This wasn't about Alex. This was about me. About punishing me for what I had done. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but before I could, Daniel spoke again. I want you to meet me. A chill ran down my spine. Tonight. No excuses. My stomach twisted painfully. Meet you? Where? You'll know when you get there, he said cryptically. Then his voice dropped, colder than ever. And Emily, if you try to run, if you call the cops, or if you think about bringing Alex back into this, you'll regret it. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, my heartbeat hammering against my ribs. Daniel had always been intense. But this? This was something else entirely. He was backing me into a corner, closing off every escape route, and I had no idea how to fight my way out. Then my phone buzzed again. A text from Daniel. Just an address. No explanation. No instructions. Just a location that felt like a trap. My fingers hovered over the screen. Should I go? Should I ignore him? Should I call someone for help? Amanda. She would know what to do. I dialed her number, my hands shaking as I listened to the ringing on the other end. She picked up almost immediately. Emily, what now? He wants me to meet him. I blurted out, my voice raw with fear. I don't know what he's planning, but it can't be good. Amanda's breath hitched. Emily, this is insane. You can't go. What if he? She stopped herself, as if saying the words out loud would make them real. What if he hurts you? I closed my eyes, swallowing back the lump in my throat. What choice do I have? I whispered. If I don't go, he'll just come here. Or worse, he'll go after Alex again. Then call the police, Amanda pleaded. Emily, you can't handle this on your own. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. You don't understand. If I call the police, Daniel will know. And if he knows. My voice cracked, the fear pressing down on me like a weight I couldn't lift. A long silence stretched between us. Then Amanda exhaled sharply. Fine. Her voice was tight, determined. If you're going to do this, at least let me come with you. I'll stay in the car, but I'm not letting you face him alone. Relief crashed over me, even though I knew it was only a small comfort. Okay, I said quietly. Meet me at my place. I'll wait for you. 20 minutes later, Amanda pulled up outside. She didn't say much as I climbed into the passenger seat, but I could see it in her face. She was scared too. The tension between us was thick, unspoken. And as she drove toward the unknown, I couldn't shake the feeling that this night was about to change everything. Amanda drove in tense silence, her fingers gripping the wheel a little too tightly as we followed the GPS toward the address Daniel had sent. The further we got from town, the more isolated the roads became. By the time we reached the outskirts, the streets had turned into a desolate wasteland of abandoned warehouses and forgotten industry. The few remaining streetlights flickered weakly, casting jagged shadows across crumbling buildings covered in graffiti. My stomach twisted as Amanda pulled the car to a stop a block away. Are you sure about this? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. No, I admitted, my hands trembling as I reached for the door handle. But I don't have a choice. The night air was sharp, cutting through me as I stepped outside. My breath curled in the dim light, disappearing into the darkness. I turned toward the warehouse, Daniel's chosen location. It loomed in front of me, its windows shattered, its rusted metal doors slightly ajar. The darkness inside swallowed any light that tried to creep in. I hesitated. Glanced back at Amanda. She sat in the car, gripping the steering wheel like she wanted to bolt out and drag me back inside. But when our eyes met, she gave me a small, hesitant nod. That was all I needed. I turned back toward the warehouse and forced myself to move. One step. Then another. And another. The air inside was thick, damp, stale. The faint smell of rust and mildew clung to the walls. Each step I took sent echoes bouncing against the high ceilings, making me feel small. Exposed. I swallowed hard. Daniel? I called out, my voice trembling. Nothing. I took another step. My heartbeat pounded so loud I could hear it in my ears. The silence was suffocating. Then. A single light flickered on. The bare bulb dangled in the center of the room, its weak glow casting long, eerie shadows against the cracked concrete. And beneath it, standing completely still, was Daniel. His arms were crossed. His face unreadable. Too calm. Far too calm. That terrified me more than any outburst ever could. You came, he said, his voice void of any emotion. I didn't have a choice, I replied, my throat dry. My voice barely held steady. Daniel, what is this? What do you want from me? He tilted his head slightly, his sharp eyes studying me as if he was trying to figure something out. I want you to feel it, Emily. Feel what? I whispered, though I already knew. The betrayal. The humiliation. The pain. The weight of his words pressed down on me like a lead blanket. I swallowed hard, my chest tightening. I already do, Daniel, I pleaded. I feel it every second of every day. Not enough, he said, his voice as cold as the concrete walls around us. Not nearly enough. Before I could respond, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled something out. A small recorder. My stomach dropped. Daniel pressed play. And then, Alex's voice filled the empty space around us, bouncing off the warehouse walls. She's not going to leave him, Amanda. She's too scared. But don't worry, I'll take care of her. I always do. The words hit me like a slap. The air left my lungs. I felt like I had been punched, like the wind had been knocked out of me. Daniel didn't react. He just stood there, watching me. Waiting. Do you see it now? He asked, his voice low. The lies. The games. Everything you threw away for someone who doesn't give a damn about you. Tears blurred my vision as I shook my head. The weight of it all was suffocating. Daniel, please, I begged. I made a mistake, but this isn't the way. He stepped closer, his movements slow, deliberate. His face was inches from mine. You don't get to decide that anymore, Emily. His voice was calm. Steady. And that was more terrifying than any scream could have been. I had shattered him. And now, I was standing in the wreckage of the man I had broken, forced to watch him pick up the pieces and reshape them into something unrecognizable. Daniel, I whispered, my voice trembling. I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am. I'm so sorry. His laugh was bitter, slicing through the heavy air like a knife. Sorry? He shook his head, taking another step forward. You think that word means anything to me now, Emily? His voice was sharp, laced with something deep and raw. You destroyed everything we built. And for what? His expression darkened. For him. I flinched, his words cutting me deeper than I expected. I made a mistake, I choked out, tears streaming down my face. A terrible, unforgivable mistake. But hurting me isn't going to fix this, I said, my voice cracking. It's not going to fix you. Daniel tilted his head slightly, his eyes narrowing as if he were trying to decipher whether I was being sincere or just playing another game. You still don't get it, he said finally, his voice low, dangerously steady. This isn't about fixing anything. This is about balance. About justice. The recorder in his hand clicked off. The silence that followed was deafening. Even without the recording playing, I could still hear Alex's smug voice in my head, taunting me, reminding me just how far I had fallen. Daniel took a step back, his movements precise, deliberate. Then he reached into his jacket. My breath caught in my throat. I watched as he pulled out a small black case, flipping it open with chilling ease. Inside. A handgun. The metal gleamed under the harsh yellow light, polished, perfect, deadly. My knees nearly buckled. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to move, to run, to do something, but all I could do was stand there, frozen in place, my pulse pounding in my ears. Daniel, no. The words barely made it past my lips. This isn't you. You're not a killer. His gaze was cold, unreadable. I wasn't, he admitted. Then his expression hardened. But then again, I wasn't a man whose wife slept with her boss either. A fresh wave of guilt crashed over me. I shook my head, stepping back instinctively as he advanced. Please, I whispered, my voice barely audible. You don't have to do this. Daniel didn't respond. Instead, he raised the gun. I sucked in a sharp breath. But he didn't point it at me. He aimed it at the floor. Then. Bang. The gunshot shattered the stillness of the warehouse, a deafening explosion that sent a scream ripping from my throat. The sound ricocheted off the concrete walls, ringing in my ears like a siren. I stumbled backward, clutching my chest as adrenaline flooded my system. Daniel lowered the gun slowly, his expression unreadable. See, Emily, he said, his voice disturbingly calm. I'm not going to hurt you. That's too easy. Too merciful. He took a step closer. What I want, he continued, his tone eerily composed, is for you to live with this. To carry it with you every single day, just like I have to. I stared at him, my breathing ragged, my body still trembling from the shock of the gunshot. Then, before I could stop myself, anger surged through me, cutting through the fear like a blade. So what? I spat, my voice shaking. You dragged me here, scared me half to death, just to make some grand speech about how hurt you are? Congratulations, Daniel. You've made your point. Now what? For the first time since I walked into the warehouse, his calm facade cracked. A flicker of something, pain, regret, anger, flashed across his face. But it was gone just as quickly as it came. Now, he said quietly, his voice almost emotionless again. Now, I let you go. A hollow pit formed in my stomach. But not without a reminder. Before I could process his words, he reached into his jacket again and pulled out a manila envelope. He tossed it to the floor at my feet. Take it, he said. I hesitated, my hands shaking as I crouched down and picked it up. With trembling fingers, I opened the flap and peeked inside. My stomach turned. Photos. Dozens of them. Pictures of me and Alex. Some candid. Some, intimate. Every single one damning. I sucked in a shaky breath. He had been following me. Documenting everything. You didn't just betray me, Emily, Daniel said, his voice sharp as ice. You humiliated me. You made me a joke. His words hit me harder than the gunshot. And now, he continued, you get to feel what that is like. My hands clenched around the envelope, my vision blurring with tears. What are you going to do with these? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Daniel studied me for a moment, then shrugged. That depends on you, he said simply. If I see Alex anywhere near you again, if I hear so much as a whisper about you too, he tilted his head slightly, these go public. My stomach twisted. Your family. Your friends. Your colleagues. His expression didn't change. Everyone will know exactly who you are. A lump formed in my throat. I wanted to scream. To lash out. To fight. But I knew it wouldn't change a damn thing. Daniel had the upper hand. And he knew it. You don't have to do this, I whispered, my voice breaking. I'll stay away from him. I'll do whatever you want. He gave a small nod, like he had already expected that answer. I know you will, he said simply. Because now you understand what happens when you don't. Then, without another word, he turned toward the door. His footsteps echoed against the concrete as he walked away, his presence lingering even as he neared the exit. Just before stepping outside, he paused. Glanced back at me one last time. Goodbye, Emily. Then he was gone. I stood there, frozen in place, the envelope still clutched in my hands. The weight of everything that had just happened settled onto my chest, suffocating me. My mind spun, racing to keep up, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake one terrifying realization. Daniel had let me go. But this? This wasn't over. Not even close. Daniel had shattered me. But not in the way I had feared. He didn't have to lay a hand on me, he had done something far worse. He had made sure I would never escape the wreckage of my own choices. As I stepped out of the warehouse and into the freezing night air, a sob caught in my throat. I wasn't just leaving Daniel behind. I was leaving behind everything I had once been. The life I had destroyed. The life I could never put back together. This felt like an ending. But the destruction Daniel had set in motion, the destruction I had set in motion, was far from over. The damage was done. And it would haunt me long after this night was gone, the weight of silence. The night air was still, the kind of silence that felt too heavy, too thick, like it knew something terrible had just happened. I walked away from the warehouse, my footsteps echoing in the emptiness, but the weight in my chest didn't lift. I clutched the envelope in my shaking hands, holding it like it might somehow change everything, undo what had already been done. But it wouldn't. It was just paper, paper filled with proof that my life, my mistakes, my betrayal, would never be erased. Amanda's car was exactly where I had left it. She was still inside, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. The second she saw me, she jumped out, eyes wide with worry. "Emily," she started, but I shook my head. "Not here," I whispered, my voice raw. "Just drive." She didn't argue. She didn't ask questions. She just got back in, and as soon as I closed my door, she pulled away from that place, leaving the past in the rearview mirror. Except the past never really stays behind, does it? We drove in silence, the city lights blurring past us. My fingers tightened around the envelope in my lap. The more I held it, the more suffocating it felt. "What happened in there?" Amanda finally asked. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. How was I supposed to explain it? That Daniel hadn't just confronted me, he had ruined me. That he had made sure I would never move past this, that the consequences of my choices would follow me forever. That the man I had loved was gone, and in his place was someone I no longer recognized. I inhaled sharply, forcing my voice to work. "He gave me a choice," I murmured. "Stay away from Alex, or let everyone see what I've done." Amanda's grip tightened on the wheel. And I don't have a choice." My voice cracked. Amanda was quiet for a long moment before she spoke. "You know this isn't over, right?" I nodded. I knew. Daniel might have walked away tonight, but that didn't mean he was gone. He had made it clear, he would always be watching, always waiting to see if I would cross the line again. And if I did, he would be there to make sure I regretted it. I leaned my head against the window, exhaustion settling deep into my bones. "Just take me home," I whispered. "I need to think." 3 months later. I had done exactly what Daniel asked. I cut off Alex. I changed my routine. I moved apartments, changed jobs. Anything to put distance between myself and the past, between myself and him. And for a while, it worked. Until one night, I found something slipped under my door. A single photograph. Daniel's handwriting scrawled across the back in bold, sharp letters. "I told you I'd be watching." My stomach dropped. I turned the photo over. It was a picture of me, sitting alone in a coffee shop, staring at my phone. I hadn't even realized anyone had been watching. The blood drained from my face. I thought I had left this behind. I thought I had done everything right. But it didn't matter. Because Daniel wasn't done. And maybe, he never would be.